Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. This is Rick, your friend from Blind. And today we have Tim Armandpour, who's the Chief Technology Officer at Dun 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 PagerDuty. You might have heard of his company. PagerDuty is an American cloud computing company specializing in a software as a service incident response platform for IT and tech departments. It's been recognized by Forbes on its Cloud 100, as well as the USA Today list for the top small and mid-sized companies for diversity very recently. It's headquartered in San Francisco and it actually has operations in Canada, the southeast of the US, the UK, and Australia. Tim, did I get everything about PagerDuty right?
Just about. We also have a new office we've stood up in Lisbon, Portugal. So
Wow.
we're really excited about our Lisbon Dutonians, as we call ourselves, getting up and running. And I was just there in June, and it is definitely a fantastic place to go visit, and even better place to work. So we're super excited about Lisbon.
Newtonians. Can you explain kind of the nickname there?
Yeah, it spawned probably more than a decade or so ago. The company's about 14 years old. We've definitely evolved into being recognized and known for more than anything else. I think of us as like this mission critical integrated platform that really just always has to be up. Like I tell a lot of stories around, like we're like the dial tone for a lot of companies. We're like that, like when you pick up the phone, it just needs to work. And then I have to check myself because sometimes folks are a little bit younger have never had to hear a dial tone. And I first had to walk people through what a pager was. But here we are now, full circle. What's a dial tone? Ultimately, it's like the power grid just needs to always be up and running. Our customers depend on us for that. So where we're starting to get used more and more, and it is that scenario where you love us, you hate us, you love us, you hate us, because we will find you when we need to.
Right.
And more often than not, it's better when we're the one calling you versus your boss. Think of it that way.
Okay.
We've definitely evolved into more of again, like this integrated platform where we're being used by all kinds of organizations, not just technology organizations,
Right.
because what we found is the nature of being on call, when something goes sideways, it's like this interrupt driven work that shows up. It kind of just emerges and takes on its own life form. You have to react to it, almost akin to like a doctor running a trauma room, right? You don't know when the patient's coming in, you don't know what they're going to have, but you ideally are well equipped to understand the context of the patient, what to do next, how to assemble your team and the support staff around it to go make it better. We found that kind of work shows up in all walks of an organization. So we're being used from marketing teams to revenue teams
Wow.
to security teams, IT and ops teams, all centered on this notion that when you get interrupted, it's kind of pretty important, and most likely the clock is ticking. So what help do you need to get that work done? And usually it involves someone other than you. And that's where some of that escalation factor of the natural on-call scenario comes in. Bring in some other experts. Ideally, you got data at your fingertips to make a good decision and either fix a thing, or in some cases, like with revenue, your campaign's going so well, double your investment, make it rain, right? Better to know that now versus 2 weeks from now when you get that consolidated report and you're like, oh, I missed that window. So PagerDuty's definitely evolved quite a bit with, I think we got something a little bit north of 19,000 customers. I think 65 or so of the Fortune 100 using us. It's been a wild journey, and I'm in year 8, and it feels like we're always just getting started.
So Tim, just to dial back for a second, when you mentioned about like people would hate us, for the uninitiated like myself,
Yeah.
what like, why would that be? I mean, it seems like what you're describing
Yeah.
is that you're helping people with their tech to make sure it works. So
Yeah.
about what am I missing, or what are
There's
the audience too?
thing,
Like what's
there's a thing out in the industry, especially with most developers that are on call and responsible for the uptime availability of the code and the services that they build, is when PagerDuty's calling, your phone might be ringing, your app push notifications going off. People have been, I guess, more or less conditioned to know that, oh, something's wrong.
so something's wrong. So when they hear your name or your company's name, like
They're
Oh
like,
no, what happened? What's
PagerDuty, the
up?
PagerDuty alert is like a branded thing, it seems like, out there where, you know, if you have your partner, you know, sleeping next to you and this thing goes off, it's like, well, there's PagerDuty again. And reality is like, it's not really PagerDuty. We're kind of like the don't shoot the messenger scenario.
Right, because it's not you're doing it. It's like the company that's
Yeah.
having the issue. It's just you're the one. You're the group that's kind of,
Yeah.
like you said, the emergency room, where you're the fireman or police officer who's coming there to fix it. So, but they should be happy you're doing it. But I guess they're frustrated that something's going wrong and they need that
Exactly.
outside
Frustrated
help.
something's going
in the
wrong.
moment, right?
Yeah.
In that moment, like that Pavlovian response kicks in, and
Right.
it's like this surge of anxiety that hits
Yeah.
you. And it's like, uh-oh, what's going on? And you don't know.
Because you don't
yet.
know, I guess, like they don't know how bad it is. So if
You
like
don't know yet.
PagerDuty is calling, it could be really something serious, maybe innocuous, but it's like, uh-oh.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be smoke but no fire. Ideally, we help teams get ahead so that it's not a total wildfire by the time you show up. But we are a resilient bunch when it comes to, you know, again, part of our software is designed to make sure that we do find you and you do respond. And we've been at it for a while. And I think this year alone, we're going to process something like well north of 1 billion notifications globally.
Wow.
Across
All right.
1 million users.
Tim, this is gonna sound really stupid, but that's what I'm here for, to ask these questions, these stupid questions. What if every once in a while you would just reach out to these companies just to say hi, so they don't think every time you call is a problem?
So, you know, it's actually not a stupid question. It's a really interesting point there, Jack, because there are, you know, a lot of companies will send out, for example, marketing messages, right? Maybe via email, right? Now, when PagerDuty calls, it could be over voice, could be over text, could be like a push notification within our mobile apps, could also be over email, and sometimes all at the same time. Many of our customers have actually created like rules in their email engines to actually filter PagerDuty a certain way, where it will, if PagerDuty is in the text, it'll go to another system that might then automatically start escalating and calling people out internally. So if we were just say hello, it's actually yet another unnerving scenario at times. So we've had to figure out ways to get creative where we can get our marketing and our, hey, did you know we just released some cool new stuff, without freaking everyone out. You know, there's been some really interesting use cases over the years of ways in which PagerDuty has been leveraged or used. I think used more than abused is usually the scenario. But some people some people had put their spouses, for example, with PagerDuty because, for example, they might be close to giving childbirth and they wanted to make sure they can get in touch with each other very quickly in case it's time before it was planned to be time. And so then all of a sudden we got spouses on PagerDuty. I mean, it's been wild.
And again, this might be a very naive question. You said what, like how many, 19,000 customers
globally.
And I would imagine some of these firms have like great systems, but I guess no matter how robust your technology is, there's always going to be glitches. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be hiccups. So
always something.
Yeah.
I like to say that everything's in some kind of state of failure. You just may not know exactly what it is or how bad it might be. But no, it is true that it's almost like, think of it, anything with blinking lights, those lights need to keep blinking. And if they're not, how do you know? When do you know? How often can you afford for some lights to stop, to go off for a little bit without others noticing? And so we like to think of whether it's, you know, the most cutting edge technology versus also even like think about in the physical world, from digital to physical, even in like regular brick and mortar, you go shopping and you want to buy your thing, and all of a sudden you swipe the credit card, that doesn't work. Well, when time goes on, you might actually now not buy the thing. Who knows who's fixing it, who's addressing it, right? What's happening? We have a variety of scenarios where it's a company in San Francisco that does food delivery, and they source things and they actually hold on to the goods in refrigerators. And if those refrigerators, for example, don't maintain a certain temperature, the food can spoil. So they have us integrated with their refrigerator temperature sensors. And if things start to oscillate too much, that'll fire off an alert into the team that's responsible to make sure that the fridge stays online. right? So it's even like behind the scenes things like that that are important to just keep humming. Like the world just has to keep humming. How do we ensure that that
That's
happens?
so interesting. So it can really scale to all sorts of other types of, companies and technologies and
All sorts.
systems.
It's not just, like Slack and Zoom, for example, right? That use us and leverage us a lot. It is the variance of types of customers and companies and industries we have is really, really, I think, unique and fun. And the challenge is we're supposed to be at our best when all of our customers may not be. So
Now, do you guys help out with the problems, or you just alert them
no,
in the situation?
we're the provider to help them become aware that there's an issue, or we've done over the last probably 5 years done a lot of investment in data and data science and data research. We've got 14 years of data to mine across the tens of thousands of customers and billions upon billions of signals, tens of billions of signals we've served over the last 14 years. And what that's shown us is that there's also a lot of interesting inferences you can make to try and get ahead of a problem. So you might see a pattern forming, this type of pattern of events or things transpire pretty consistently in this very specific scenario, and it's happened 17 times in the last 30 days. Hey team, we've uncovered this. Is it a thing? Is there a needle in the haystack? Let's help you figure out at least which haystack to go look under, right? So think of it as like you see like a recommendation engine. You're shopping on Amazon, for example, at the bottom, you pick an item on the bottom, you see like, hey, we may suggest these other items. In our world, we have an ability to help surface the things that we also see, and we might recommend new actions, new things to think about, new ways in which you can get the right kind of coverage on your things that you own, so that, again, if it goes sideways, you're very well prepared, because it's more like it's probably a when, not an if things go a little bump in the night.
Right. Shifting that kind of like reactive approach, something more proactive
More
and
proactive, and
forward
that
thinking. Right.
panacea is getting to preventative. It's like think of like healthcare. Can you really get into preventive healthcare? Well, it takes a lot of
Sure.
intent and purpose
Right.
and whatnot. It's better to be at minimum proactive versus reactive, right?
Right. I realize I might be playing a dangerous game, like pulling at the, the string at the sweater and risking everything just going to haywire. But I have this rare opportunity, like Tim, before you joined PagerDuty,
Yeah.
you're the senior vice president of engineering and product at YapStone. Worked in several years in roles and on the technical side at PayPal. Um, Obviously, different startups before then. But why does kind of this like on-call system get such a bad rap in the engineering community? Like, how can we improve what is, kind of almost universally seen as a kind of just like a terrible experience to go
Yeah.
through? How do we make it better?
It's a really good question. I think part of the challenge is it's a hard gig to be on call.
Right.
Right. So when you're on call, it's like, again, very analogous to like the world of healthcare. If you're a doctor on call, you're going to manage your time a very specific way in those off hours. You're not traveling. You're almost like tethered to waiting for the call to happen, right? To go answer it and deal with it, because that's part of the job. So when you're on call for software and systems, it's very similar. You're kind of like your laptop is right next to you. You got your phone ready to go. We give mobile, MiFi devices to engineers and whatnot. And it's pretty much life feels like it's on hold for that duration. It might be 2 days, it might be 1 week. It just depends on the teams and the environment. So this notion of on-call, it's just a hard gig at the end of the day. And one of PagerDuty's missions has been, how can we help make that easier? How can we make it more well supported, more well understood, such that when you're on call, it's not so hard, Rick. It's not when back in the day, again, you had those 1 or 2-way Motorola pagers, you would just get the page. It might have a phone number or some message when back, in high school, we'd had little pages, you could turn them around, they would say hello and things like that based on the numbers showing up.
Right.
But back then you just get the page, you would know nothing. Well, nowadays, I think PagerDuty's done a good job of, especially when the founders started, their view is like, it doesn't have to feel like a third tier thing. It should be elevated like a first class experience status, so that when you're on call and PagerDuty is calling you, it actually is a very real thing. And when you show up, we can help give you enough context so you can make a good, quick decision and be done with it, ideally, right? Put the fire out, like we can help you find where the buckets of water are. How many buckets you need, we can't really tell you always, but at the very minimum, we can tell you where the buckets in the water source are, to help you out. So there's a bad rap associated with just that it's hard, and it's not getting any easier because complexity of systems are going up faster than the rate of knowledge and experience can. Companies getting more complex the more they want to go full digital. More is riding on the digital strategy inside companies than ever before. I talk to a lot of customers. Many of our customers will say words now of, we are a digital company that happens to monetize via air travel. We are a digital company that happens to monetize via banking, right? And so this shift has been going on in the industries probably for a better part of a decade, and now it's showing up more and more and more because a lot of the way our lives have transformed and how we interact with the world as we know it. And so behind the scenes of all that, there are people that are developing things, plugging things in, basically, assuming, and part of their job is to make sure that stuff works smoothly. And even when it doesn't, ideally nobody notices. And that's part of the practice and rigor of getting better and better at operating what you build. So I think PagerDuty has a part to play to help put a positive dent in the universe that way.
Well, it seems to me from what like Rick mentioned, I could give an analogy as I head up a search firm and been doing it for 25 years. And oftentimes when a company gives me an assignment to work on, there's this little bit, this twinge of when the HR person has to give it to us, like, you don't trust us doing it. Why don't you do it? Why can't we could do it ourselves? Why are you giving it to Jack? So this weird thing. So it feels like, I wonder, somebody who's this technologist, some software designer, what have you, if all of a sudden you get a ding that something went wrong, it's almost like, oh man, how dare you? My work is great. You're questioning my work, so they take it personal. So I'm looking at it from an outside objective,
Yeah.
like because I can imagine this. I see how that is, where you take it personally, like, wait, what? No, it can't be me. I wrote the
Not my
best code
code.
ever.
Not my code. Can never be my
Yeah.
code. I mean, that's I think you're spot on, Jack. There's definitely like a vanity or ego hit at times. There's also this notion of I think a lot of folks out in the industry, because I think software development, I think systems development, architecture, building products has evolved into such a team sport more and more nowadays than it was maybe even 20 years ago, when you just put headphones on and just start, developing and programming and coding all on your own in your own office. That just doesn't happen that often anymore, right? And there's a complexity factor that's kicked in that requires a small squad to work really well together, to build trust, and again, figure out how to, it's like, grit and grind, and figure out how to be resilient through almost like the natural different life forms that parts of software and systems take on once they're out in the wild and being used in ways you may not have expected. So how well can you solve? I think things have shifted a bit where it's less vanity for you as the individual. It's more like you almost feel bad that it's you. So how motivated and quickly are you to put it out, so you're not letting your team down, you're not letting your team of teams down, your company, your customers, etc. So I think that's where a lot of the mindset of the industry is shifted. At least I like to think that's a healthy place to be, right? And it's not a like internal at PagerDuty, we talk a lot about, it's not an if, it's a when something goes sideways, and our jobs would be really well prepared to manage through that, because it's going to happen. We just don't know exactly when always.
On a lighter note, Tim, when you have younger people joining you,
Yeah.
and the name pager, do they even understand what a pager is? Do they
No,
know? Do they, or do
I
they even know like a phone? I'm old enough to know when you had the rotary phones, when you have to like go
we
to, kind of go around doing that. Do
I
they,
mean
do
I
they
mean
know
I
about it?
Jack, I think like you've peeked inside some of my older slide decks of production into PagerDuty to my engineers. No, the reality is, some of the younger folks, the terminology being used doesn't exactly stick. It doesn't translate very easily. I actually literally do have a slide deck that had a picture of a couple of Motorola pagers, rotary phone, and I think it looked like one of those operators that would punch the cords in to answer with the
Beautiful.
headset on, right? Just to give people a feel or an idea of the notion of like how information is transferred. And when we use these, like this is kind of how things have evolved over time. But pager does not, everyone knows their iOS or Android device. That's pretty much it. So the reality is like being in that mode of working, the phone has become like your ally. It's like your partner in crime for everything you do, right? And we like to think if we're on that phone, then we've got an opportunity to be your ally and help you do well at the end of the day. That's what we're really, that's where the purpose comes in, is to help people be able to do their jobs better and just get, the important work done. So if we believe in that, then, it's all unicorns and rainbows and everything will be fine.
One thing that I love, and I want to dig into your background here, is you joined PagerDuty to lead up the engineering team, but you also spent some time in product development. Like,
Yes.
how did your experience as an engineer yourself, as a technical, head, how did that translate in terms of like actually developing the kind of product roadmap, that like
Yeah.
strategy there?
Yeah, good question. I think in my last company at YapStone, where I was running both products and technology side of the house,
Right.
one, I think for a technologist to lean into the business is probably one of the single most important things to get comfortable in doing, because as a builder of things, it just helps you get more well informed to make the next really good decision about how you're going to go about building something. It could be a small piece of software, the entirety of the product, and understanding what are the moving parts of the business is I think is a great way to complement kind of the upbringing of the technology career. I also found it to be incredibly humbling. I mean, it is a hard job when you're in the business of finding ways to say no effectively, because you have no choice but to ruthlessly prioritize. Even then, you're still not prioritizing all the things well enough. There's not enough time in the day. When I got into PagerDuty, I joined the company, was that early 2015, I think it was. Yeah.
Right.
Companies just got B round funding, just crossed over $20 million of annual recurring revenue, which was a great milestone. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is going to go somewhere. Prior to joining, I was a buyer of PagerDuty and former end user a couple times over. So when I got a recruiter call, that was one of the easiest calls I took to learn more about the founders and company. Fell in love with the founders, fell in love with the story of why they built the company, where they're trying to go. And, I was the VP of engineering. It's only about 30 people at the time. I think the company may have had somewhere between 60 and 70 people at the time.
Wow.
So really small, crazy in a good way, but with a really strong like product fit out in the market that was just getting going. About a year in, I was asked to bring product and technology together to help streamline things. I think for a product, PagerDuty as a technologist, so close to home. Like I always I view it's like a privilege to be in my role, where I can be so close to a product and platform offering to help influence and be a part of the resulting things that we put out for customers. Because we call ourselves customer zero internally, right? If it doesn't work for us, will it really work well for the customer? So we have this great opportunity to really iterate very quickly and learn as we go on how well things could be used, should be used, will be used. But running product management where you're involved in, you're talking to customers, you're talking to industry analysts, you're learning about the landscape, trying to anticipate where things need to be in a year or two down the line, developing strategy that has to take a wide variety of inputs and synthesize that, couple that with the technology strategy to help make the business go. Again, extremely humbling. We got to a point where, I think I would say I loved and hated that job, because the part I always found challenging was how to, I think I learned about, I think I approached this completely wrong, but I was almost trying to learn how to say no too often versus finding better ways to really enable us to find easier ways to say yes. Right, because when you're running both product and technology, like you're overseeing everything soup to nuts.
Right.
Almost every dollar spent in the business almost like hinges on your shoulders, it feels like at times. And that in itself, a technologist leaning into the business, building up your business acumen, understanding the business, being able to represent the business as well as you represent the technology side, is probably, I think it's one of those unique experiences I've had that I firmly believe has helped me become just a more well-rounded, team member at the end of the day.
Makes a lot of sense, right? Right. Because like we've probably spoken to 40 plus people, fairly recently. And the common denominator definitely feels the person like yourself who has a skill stack, not just you might be an engineer, but then also you're fill in the blank. And by having those different experiences and background, it makes you better at your job. And I notice those are the people who kind of rise to the top too. And then if you add communication skills, which you have, then that's like the big package. Is that right? Like, do you notice that pattern, Rick? Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's like almost kind of like who is it? Flea at Gusto, the chief security officer there. He said, oh, he viewed his career arc as building this big, fabulous toolbox, right? And each position or each role, each function that he's learning or grappling with is adding a new tool to that toolbox, right? And hopefully at the end of the day, he has enough tools to do what he wants to do next, right? And I really think that that's something that more people need to hear, right? Oftentimes, people get into this pressure of, especially if you're younger,
Yes.
I want to specialize in something, right? How do I like become a fintech engineer, or I want to go into Web3 because that's trending right
Yes.
now? Or maybe you're in college and you're like, well, I don't want a bunch of student loan debt. I want to pay it off as soon as possible. So I'm going to be a programmer and
Right.
get a computer science degree, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, these are all admirable things, and certainly I wish that when I was their age or when I was younger, I had figured these things out much sooner than I had. But I also think that there's some beauty in terms of just going, what is it? Going horizontal, right?
Yeah, going
And
laterally. I think it's
laterally.
spot on in that the more you can complement your strengths, right, with opportunities to learn more about maybe a different area, different discipline. One of the things I've learned over the years, and I'm still working on it, is how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Okay.
And I think that gets harder as you take on more responsibility in leadership roles, because as you rise up in an organization, I feel this all the time, is that your role actually feels more and more lonely,
Huh.
because there's only like one of you sometimes in that role.
Right.
There's not another
Oh.
CTO at Pager, there's not another CEO, not another chief revenue officer, so on and so forth. And one of the best ways I think to manage through that is over the years, and one of the things I've learned a lot is keep building your network, keep meeting people. As young developers, go to conferences, go to meetups. The world is coming back in a good way. Get out there. Submit topics to talk about. One of the things we've done internally here at PagerDuty. So, I helped sponsor it when I first got here, but we call it PagerCon. It's an
Okay.
internal conference that's run by engineers for product managers and engineers primarily, right? And we run it like a user conference. So we have a call for papers, we have a selection committee, we have a, we will rent out a venue. We've basically mainly done it in San Francisco and Toronto. People will pick from a different topic formats. Could be long form, 30 minutes, could be short form, 10 minutes. And pretty much it's almost like sharing is caring. So if you got something that you're very passionate about, or you just learned about a thing and you applied it here at PagerDuty, spread it with the community. And I think what that's done is helped a lot of, again, most developers by trade are somewhat introverted, and getting comfortable with speaking skills and articulating your thoughts in a clear and concise manner. That's an experience and skill. You don't just do it. You have to do it and keep getting better and keep practicing it. And so, we've definitely invested in that internally here. It's something I'm super passionate about, and building up the communication toolbox for a lot of us, because, not sharing is almost like, detrimental. But working laterally and thinking about ways in which you can help complement your own strength areas, and also it just creates a better sense of empathy for continuing to build up perspective, right? Because especially everything is a team sport inside a company. You don't work isolated anymore. So when someone comes knocking on your door and it's really urgent, they really need something from you, maybe we can all take a step back and say, okay, well, tell me what's going on, versus automatically saying, no, I can't do it. Right. And I think, if the more that, leaders and companies and people can foster that, then you're almost like re-recruiting your own people and building up that career architecture in a much more well-rounded way versus purely a vertical way. Right. Because some of the challenges in the industry is like, I show up as a software engineer right out of school. How do I get to senior software engineer?
Right.
Okay, hold on. Sometimes a little time on the earth, certain amount of experience goes a long way. But let's look at all the dimensions that make up, what we would need from you as a senior team contributor, right? And there are no participation trophies. You're gonna have to broaden things out, maybe get a little more T-shaped versus just, straight up and down, and hopefully round out your entirety of skills and experiences over time.
I think one thing that I find fascinating about what you mentioned is, right, it's lonely at the top, but you mentioned that it's still important to take risks, but also necessarily as you kind of rise through your career, the stakes get bigger.
Yeah, for
So how do you manage that like appetite or need for risk taking with, gosh, like there's only one of you, and if you make a mistake or things
yeah.
don't go your way or too many people get pager duty right messages, uh what do you do then, or how do you protect against that?
I think I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by individuals and colleagues that have, it's like this environment of support and empowerment, right? Knowing that you build trust with people you work with, you feel a little more comfortable sticking your neck out for something you might be really directed on or passionate about, and knowing that if you fail, it's not the end of the world. You'll be supported. People will help pick you back up, or you get up on your own. That the pressure to go make it right is probably in the right place, versus it just saying, how could you do something wrong? And I think I honestly feel like I've been fortunate and very just lucky to have surrounding, team members that, don't lose faith in you, don't lose trust in you. When you make a decision and you make a call that wasn't correct or that they didn't agree with, right? And it's the lonely feeling kicks in when you might have an inkling about a thing, and maybe you can't exactly share it with those that work for you.
Okay.
So who do you want to go brainstorm, sounding board, learn from, right? and maybe your peers on your existing team, which might be, again, heads of other departments and disciplines like at my level, or it might be an outside network you've built over the years of people to tap into and just say, hey, can we get an hour to go get coffee or go get a beer? Or nowadays, can I just Zoom really quick and just bounce something off you? Here's what I'm thinking. And that in itself is like invaluable. And I think a lot of us as leaders, we love to listen, right? It's easily some of the best learning that can happen. But you got to put time into it. You got to be intentional about it. Nothing comes for free. So you have to be like I was talking about, uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. Not knowing the answer is an uncomfortable feeling for a leader. It's not easy. Right.
We're for an engineer, right? Like you guys are so technical, right? The exact answers.
Engineers, we're wired to be most comfortable with deterministic outcomes.
Right.
Things are going to happen in this order, like this, and that's what's going to transpire, right? That's what we like.
Right.
That's happy place. Life doesn't work that way, though.
Speaking of uncomfortable, what do you think about the market now? And maybe just kind of looking, you know, this is a time of year where you look ahead, what's going to happen in the new year, where we have all these layoffs, hiring freezes, job offer rescissions. Do you also open AI, where GPT chat?
Yeah.
Are those going to be good? You have any sense? I mean, we're all guessing here a little bit, but do you have any thoughts of, like, for people who are trying to reinvent themselves, pivot, kind of what can I do next? Any sense of where things are going?
Yeah, I think if we start with, like, you know, the environment we're in, I think this next year, I was just talking to another leader at a very large company. We were just powwowing where it's still in my head because it was so recent, but I'll say he kind of coined it as next year is like the year of the goat rodeo. And what he meant by that is that,
wait, the what rodeo?
The goat rodeo.
Okay.
And where he was coming from is just, it's going to be a lot of things that we may not be able to predict coming together, but it's almost like this opportunity to re-baseline ourselves, right? And the reality is a lot of organizations, to your point, are doing the layoffs or, you know, correcting their workforce strategy for one reason or another. The reality is, like, their internals of things they're responsible for and or things that they are getting paid to do for their customer, that's not necessarily changing, right? So it's almost like we have to re-baseline and redetermine like what is most needed, right? And ideally not be in the sense of having to, like, think about what's the minimal amount I need, but what is the appropriate amount needed to have a healthy balance for some measured outcomes, right? And that's going to force us as leaders to find new leverage points of all sorts. And it's a pretty wide variance to look at. It could be stuff that is supported by technology, maybe some aspects of automation where instead of having a person, you know, configure a laptop for me, maybe that's done automatically, right? And that gives a company leverage. Unfortunately, that means there's one less job to be done. So there's an adaptation that has to take place in terms of where skills going to be, you know, built and put into motion. I think the silver lining will be, and we I mean, for some of us been through, we saw this happen right after 99 and 2000, where, you know, the proverbial .com bust, right? We saw some self-correcting behavior kick in 2008, right? In general, I don't think we're going to, in 23 and 24, is it going to be as extreme as those, but there is some correction that's going to happen to help us re-baseline and then ideally be able to springboard back up and out. And the skills that maybe are getting laid off, ideally it's temporary, and they're going to get almost like the demand will start to show back up, but in different places. So especially in industries, let's say, that haven't really gone into their digital transformation and start moving towards it, they're probably going to need to accelerate that. Well, those that were laid off in company A may be in more demand in a company B that may not have ever hired that kind of worker before. Right? I think that is where we're going to see some stuff shake out. I think, the advent of more and more machine learning and AI, that's not going anywhere. It is probably the year where we see accelerations in adoption because of just the leverage it gives, companies, teams, products, services, etc. And the last bit, I think, with the chat GPT, we were joking before, but it is a remarkable experience to go through and give it something and see what you get back. I think where things end up evolving is like, great, well, how do you know that thing it just spat back? How do you trust that it's right? What's the in between there, where like again, there's context to be had, which is still kind of that hard part of applied AI and applied machine learning, is being able to have some of the reasoning in place such that the context just got spat back out. Is it really spot on? And it's different if it's transactional. You can tell it right now, write me an email to my employees congratulating them on the holiday season. Well, it can do that, and give it to me in limerick form, give it to me in verse. It can do all that. Now give it something that creates some inference and reasoning, and do you trust the answer you get back? That's where, again, some of the magic still needs to probably be vetted, in my opinion.
It's interesting, Tim. So I write for Forbes, and I tried GPT chat to say, how do I get a job, giving a prompt like, how do I get a job during the holidays? Or what do I do if I lost my job? And then I posted it, on LinkedIn, about 3 or 4 different versions of a theme. And I got so many comments like, this is kind of different. Are you just phoning it in? Like, I was getting all these comments where they were trying to be polite, right? Because they didn't want to be jerks. Because LinkedIn is like
Totally.
the social media. No one's like attacking each other on that place. It's not Twitter. So they were, but politely they're saying, this something's up. And I put on AI Jack Kelly, figuring, okay, maybe they'll pay, see that. And I put a little like robot at the bottom of it, like a little graphic, thinking that they would, see that and go, oh, okay, I see what he's doing. But no, they read it. And to your point, there's like no warmth, there's no emotion, it just felt flat. So much so that, that so many people were commenting, this is odd. Yeah, you're saying all the right things, but it's just not coming out. It just doesn't feel right.
Doesn't feel, there's the human side that I think is kind of hard. That's where I think that context comes in, right? It's hard to just replace that. Just holistically, right? Like a wholesale replacement of that, I don't think is anywhere near happening.
You brought up a really, key point that Rick has mentioned also to the folks at Blind, because, and maybe I should just throw this to you, Rick, right? Because he'll talk about with Meta and their stock price going down, their total compensation, and worried about it. And what he was suggesting oftentimes is that, hey, maybe look at other types of sectors that you weren't thinking before. Instead of just looking at big tech, maybe go into, whatever field that maybe doesn't have that talent, and you can kind of go there and be a rock star. Is that kind of what you're referring to? Is kind of say, maybe, all right, maybe this area for right now might be quiet for the next year or so. However, there's probably plenty of other places that would love to get somebody who's this amazing software design developer, engineer, and it's just, in whatever industry.
Yeah, I think when corrections come into the macro, like what we're experiencing now, it is ripe for companies to, especially those that are looking to disrupt an existing, could be sector, industry, problem space. This is the time when those companies start to figure things out. The talent, the war for talent, the game changes a little bit, right? Because you don't maybe have this preconceived notion that all the talent works at maybe 4 or 5 select companies. They're actually everywhere. And so how are you going to bring on the best for your needs? And the reality is there's a lot of good people with really good jobs. Also a lot of good people who are out there looking, or maybe taking some time off and reassessing, what next step is going to be most appealing to them. And, you just think about industries that are ripe for disruption via technology, and where can technologists play a really, really, I think, impactful role. Look at healthcare, Travel and hospitality is still, needing all kinds of help at times. Just think about, how much experience you've had with that when you do travel and everything. How well is that experience? How good is it? There's other things like in the industrial world that is getting shaped up, green tech. I mean, you name it, there's no shortage of need. It's just how that demand shapes up. Maybe it's not as concentrated in a handful of like 10 companies. And now there's an opportunity for the current, realm of technologists out there to actually, spread a little bit more broadly. Right.
And to build on your theme, Tim, by getting that skill stack and learning other things. So let's say you move into the travel or hospitality industry. So now you have something else to offer. So not only do you just know that tech ecosystem in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, now you have an affinity for a whole new, vertical. But you didn't lose the other ones. So you still have that historic knowledge, but now you're adding to your knowledge base a whole nother entity. And then perhaps you kind of maybe then go somewhere else different. Then all of a sudden you're pretty well rounded and I imagine you make yourself really super marketable, because then a prospective employer in the future goes, oh, well, he knows Silicon Valley, he knows hospitality, he knows travel. All right, wow, okay, this person brings a lot to the table. And talking about, when you mentioned about networking, think about the network you're going to build. It's not just going to be clustered in one area. It's going to be now kind of diversified.
Yes.
So that when things maybe go wrong in another 10 years, because we always go with these cycles, right? You say the .com, financial crisis, COVID, it's like every 10 years or so. So then every cycle, you're kind of prepared because you have a well planned out network of people to go to.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it there, Jack, in terms of being able to like create healthy amount of diversity and that diverse experience set. I think goes a long way. There's so much to draw from all the variable industries that are out there to then ideally bring home to your next chapter, right? And then to the earlier point that Rick made, just continue to build and keep building, right? Especially with your career trajectory, your career architecture. I'm very thankful to be gainfully employed. I like that. There's no doubt about it. I do think also there's a rich amount of opportunity for people to think about a lot of the other industries out there, especially in the world of like software engineering, systems engineering, product development, where so many industries are ripe for being able to take that next step and have like that strong digital presence, that strong digital experience. Everything depends on technology. Inside organizations, it's not just the CTO that has the technology workers, right? The technology team members, like almost every C-level member has a dependence on some part of technology. And that's created like a very fervent, like and wide pool to be able to play in terms of where do you want to go and apply your skills? What other part of the business would you want to learn from, right? That has very similar characteristics where, uptime matters, the quality of the service matters, the performance of the experience matters, so on and so forth, right? And that's not just tied into, IT and ops anymore. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Again, like a rebaselining opportunity to come and kind of reset parts of the industry and make sure that there is almost enough of that talent to go around in a very healthy and diverse manner.
Thank you for that wisdom in terms of like helping us also reset our expectations, or that Pavlovian response to someone at PagerDuty. I hope our community,
we're here to help.
They think of PagerDuty. They think of your advice.
We're like that little thing on your shoulder, right? We're watching, and we're going to tap you on the shoulder when you should be paying attention. And if you don't hear us the first time, we might tap a little harder, a little bit louder, to get your attention. Say, no, right now, Rick, you need to go look at this thing, grab your team, let's go together. And like I said, we're very motivated to help people be able to get their work done, do their jobs better and better.
See, maybe I got to be a spokesman for you guys, because to me, I've always run a small, medium-sized business. And when there's a tech problem, I'm grateful for, to get the help. I'm not, when something goes wrong, I'm not like, oh, something's wrong. I'm like, help me get it done.
Totally.
you know, seriously. So that's why when you guys were talking about it, I'm like trying to process it because, yeah, I'm not happy. Let's say my system went down because, give you an example, in New York City, this would happen, dude, all the time. This is crazy. There'd be construction outside and everything goes out. And you're like,
Yep.
what's going on? You're frantically trying to figure out what went out. And then you realize, all right, someone cut some cable or wire
Exactly.
somewhere. And it's, you know, that. So like to have somebody who helps kind of explain what it is and fix it up, that's a godsend. I love that. So yeah, I'm surprised why people be frustrated. They should be
Well,
happy, like, oh, there's a problem. You let me know the problem before it festers and gets worse. Thank you. That's great.
it's funny, in the early days when the founders were pitching investors, they got a lot of feedback saying, you know, why would anyone put money into like a glorified alarm clock? And the reality is, in the most primitive form, you know, alarm clocks are very fantastic tools to have near you, because if you, sometimes you got a early wake up call, you're a little annoyed that you're waking up so early, but it's better than missing your meeting or your flight or the thing that you need to get to, right? And so, you know, the founders were very persistent on like, well, I'm sorry you see it that way, you know, in terms of the glorified alarm clock, but you know, holistically, the platform's evolved into a variety of products that appeal to a large variety of industries and usage modes, such that ultimately, again, like that interrupt type of work shows up, or that surprise shows up. How well prepared are you to react to it? How well prepared are you to manage through it and still get your job done and get that important work done? And we're seeing all walks of life leverage it. So it's been a wild journey over time, and we like the pressure that comes with a service that pretty much always has to be up and running no matter what. It's just that simple. And yet we build on things we don't control, like the magic of the cloud. And so we're constantly, one of the fun technical challenges we have is how are you architecting for failure such that only you notice and your customers never do.